There is a moment in every great legend when the world tilts, the air sharpens, and history senses a new force rising. For José Mourinho, that moment didn't arrive under the Champions League lights or in front of roaring crowds. It happened quietly, in a small room, behind a closed door, with one sentence that would shape the rest of his life. "You don't understand football." And the young man who said it wasn't speaking to a friend, a rival, or a teammate, he said it to his father. José Manuel Mourinho Felix was a respected football man, a coach who understood the game through instinct and emotion. But young Mourinho saw deeper. He didn't see football the way others did. He saw patterns, systems, psychological fractures, and power dynamics. When his father lost his job, Mourinho didn't just feel sadness, he felt injustice and weakness. The world had moved his father like a pawn, and Mourinho silently vowed that it would never move him that way. From that moment, he sharpened himself. While other boys explored childhood dreams, he explored control. While others kicked balls, he kicked open the hidden doors of tactical theory. While others watched matches, he studied human behavior. He wasn't driven by the love of the game. He was driven by an obsession with understanding it on a level no one else could. His mind developed into something unusual, calculating, cold, analytical. He questioned everything. Why did players panic in the final minutes? Why did coaches lose matches before they even began? Why did weaker teams crumble? Why did stronger teams collapse under pressure? He wasn't learning football. He was preparing to manipulate it. He needed a mentor, someone who could open the gates of elite sport. He found that man in Bobby Robson. When Mourinho became Robson's interpreter, the world saw a translator, a quiet figure passing on words. But Robson saw something far greater, a mind that didn't just translate language but translated ideas, strategies, and intentions. Mourinho absorbed everything at Barcelona: how Robson inspired players, how he designed sessions, how he controlled dressing room energy, how he handled media pressure. But more importantly, Mourinho learned the power of influence. He realized that coaching wasn't just tactics, it was manipulation, psychology, theater, control. And in Barcelona, he also learned something painful. Greatness wasn't given. It was denied to you, and then you had to take it by force. Working alongside Robson, and later Louis van Gaal, Mourinho refined his identity. He discovered that he didn't want to simply advise a genius. He wanted to become one. He wanted to sit in the chair with the pressure, the responsibility, the authority. He wanted the throne. But he knew something deeper. Barcelona, the club he helped, would never choose him. They saw him as an assistant, a translator, a background figure. And Mourinho quietly began planning his escape. He studied more than anyone. He worked more than anyone. And inside him, a philosophy formed from the pain of rejection, the hunger for control, and the ambition to dismantle the romantic idea of football. Football was not art. Football was not beauty. Football was war. Portugal became the birthplace of his revolution. FC Porto was an underdog, a sleeping giant drowning in mediocrity. When Mourinho walked into the Porto dressing room, he didn't shake hands or offer motivational speeches. He told the players, "You may think you're footballers. From today, you are soldiers." And he meant every word. He trained them like soldiers, disciplined them like soldiers, and demanded loyalty at a level that bordered on fanaticism. But the players responded. They felt the electricity of destiny in the room. They sensed something dangerous and transformative about their new leader. Porto didn't just become organized, they became weaponized. In Portugal, Mourinho's true identity emerged. He crafted his defensive block with military precision, built counterattacks like ambush strategies, and engineered psychological warfare that destabilized opponents before matches even began. His teams didn't simply play, they executed. His press conferences were calculated attacks on public opinion. His tactics were traps disguised as weaknesses. He forged Porto into a perfect machine built to exploit the arrogance of Europe's richer clubs. And slowly, the continent began to realize that something terrifying was rising. Then came the moment that would change everything: the Champions League run. It wasn't luck. It wasn't the miracle people claimed. It was a tactical masterclass happening in real time. And when Porto eliminated Manchester United at Old Trafford, when Mourinho sprinted down the touchline with his fist pumping like a man possessed, the world finally saw the truth. This wasn't a celebration, it was a declaration of war. Porto became European champions because Mourinho refused to let them be anything else. He tested systems, broke opponents mentally, and rewrote the underdog script. When he lifted the trophy, he didn't smile like a dreamer. He stared like a man who knew he had proven a theory. Porto was never the destination, it was the demonstration. If he could take a modest Portuguese club to the pinnacle of Europe, imagine what he could do with unlimited resources. Roman Abramovich imagined exactly that, and England was about to witness a revolution that would terrify the football world. But before Mourinho could break the Premier League, he needed one final stage, one final evolution. One moment where the world would hear the sentence that defined an era: "I am a special one." And with that sentence, the old world of football began to crumble. The Champions League has always been a battleground disguised as a football tournament. It's a place where giants protect their thrones, where politics lurk behind refereeing decisions, where prestige is currency, and where underdogs are meant to be eliminated long before anyone begins paying attention. But José Mourinho looked at that hierarchy not with fear, but with appetite. FC Porto was not supposed to survive the group stage, let alone threaten any of Europe's kings. They were an underfunded club from a minor league, a team no one believed had the intelligence or firepower to compete with football's aristocracy. What no one knew was that Porto had become Mourinho's laboratory. While the world mocked their chances, he was preparing them like an assassin prepares a blade. Mourinho studied opponents with obsessive detail, dissecting their strengths until he turned them into weaknesses. He knew how to suffocate playmakers, how to overload vulnerable zones, how to psychologically break teams that relied too heavily on confidence. By the time Porto reached the knockout stages, they weren't just underdogs, they were a tactical ambush, disguised as a football team. And the first victim of this ambush was Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United. At Old Trafford, a fortress where dreams were known to die, Mourinho walked in without fear. He wasn't intimidated by Ferguson. He wasn't intimidated by 70,000 voices. He had built Porto for this moment. He treated United like an equation he had already solved. The match itself played out like a masterclass in tactical defiance. United expected heart, passion, chaos. Mourinho gave them geometry, discipline, and suffocation. Porto didn't panic. They didn't crumble. They struck with icy precision. And when the decisive moment arrived, the goal that shattered United's hopes, Old Trafford fell into stunned silence. But the true moment that shook Europe wasn't the goal. It was Mourinho's reaction after the final whistle. He sprinted down the touchline with a wild glare in his eyes, his arms extended as if embracing destiny itself. That sprint wasn't joy, it was a message. It was Mourinho telling the world, I warned you. Suddenly, Europe woke up. Suddenly, Mourinho was no longer the unknown strategist from Portugal. He was the man who crashed into the establishment and left debris behind him. Porto didn't slow down after United. They suffocated Lyon, dismantled Deportivo, and marched to the Champions League final against Monaco. The world dismissed the final as a joke, calling it weak, calling it unworthy. But Mourinho didn't care about aesthetics. He cared about execution. Porto walked onto the pitch like an execution squad, and Monaco never stood a chance. Every pass, every tackle, every movement was calibrated. Mourinho's Porto won 3-2-0, but the score didn't capture the domination. It felt like watching a crime perfectly planned and flawlessly executed. As Porto lifted the trophy, Mourinho hardly celebrated. He didn't smile like a man experiencing the moment of his life. He studied the field like a general examining the aftermath of a victory he had already predicted months ago. To him, Porto was not the peak. Porto was proof. Proof that his methods, the discipline, the psychology, the hostility, the structure could conquer Europe. And a man in London had been watching. Roman Abramovich, Chelsea's billionaire owner, saw Mourinho not as a coach but as a weapon, disruptor capable of rewriting the Premier League's hierarchy. The call came quickly. The negotiations were quiet. And just like that, Madrid, Milan, Parasol, the elite cities that might have become his next destination, disappeared from possibility. England was calling. And Mourinho arrived not as a humble newcomer but as a force ready to dismantle traditions. He sat down at his first Chelsea press conference wearing a dark suit and a colder expression, and he delivered the line that became immortal. I think I am a special one. The room froze. The cameras clicked violently. The journalists gasped. That sentence didn't just introduce Mourinho to England, it detonated across the football landscape like an explosive. He wasn't asking for acceptance. He wasn't seeking approval. He was warning them. Chelsea, England, and the entire Premier League were about to experience a transformation they were not prepared for. Mourinho didn't come to play fast-paced English football. He didn't come to join the culture. He came to break it. The Premier League prided itself on unpredictability, on chaos, on end-to-end battles. Mourinho arrived with systems sharp enough to slice through that tradition. He built Chelsea into a fortress, defenders who became warriors, midfielders who became machines, attackers who became weapons. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't romantic. It was something far more devastating, inevitable. Chelsea suffocated teams, muted superstars, and carved out victories with surgical precision. Mourinho didn't just want to win. He wanted to make winning feel predetermined. And as he manipulated the media, attacked rivals, seduced players into loyalty, and turned Chelsea into a tactical death machine, the Premier League felt something shift. Football was entering a new age, an age Mourinho would control. When José Mourinho entered Chelsea's dressing room for the first time, he didn't wear the polite smile most managers bring to a new job. He didn't try to charm players or soften the transition. He walked in with the confidence of a prosecutor stepping into a courtroom, certain that he was the smartest and most dangerous man present. The stars in that room, Lampard, Terry, Drogba, Makelele, expected instructions. What they got was a declaration of dominance. Mourinho told them plainly, "You work for me now." Asterisk. That sentence erased any illusion that he had come to fit into the club. Mourinho wasn't joining Chelsea. He was consuming it, reshaping it into a reflection of his ideology, making it cold, clinical, and unbreakable. Chelsea under Mourinho became something England had never seen before. The Premier League, for decades, was celebrated for chaos and two-end play. Emotional swings, wild tackles, reckless courage. Mourinho stepped in and shut the chaos down like a man turning off a faucet. He replaced adrenaline with calculation, instinct with structure, passion with obedience, with Claude Makelele anchoring his system like a human firewall, with John Terry and Ricardo Carvalho acting as twin pillars of steel, with Frank Lampard arriving late into the box like a silent executioner, and with Didier Drogba transformed into a one-man war machine. Chelsea became a force that didn't just win, it suffocated. Football in England had always been unpredictable. Under Mourinho, Chelsea made it look predetermined. The numbers told the story. 15 goals conceded in a season, a defensive record untouched to this day. 95 points. Dominance so absolute it felt like the league had been redesigned around Chelsea's will. But the true revolution wasn't on the pitch. It was off it. Mourinho turned press conferences into battlegrounds, psychological traps designed to manipulate narratives. He attacked referees. He taunted rival managers. He created storylines that drew all attention to himself, shielding his players from criticism. He weaponized words. He understood the media better than the media understood itself. He used controversy as a distraction, ensuring every headline about Chelsea was about him, not the squad. This wasn't accidental. This was strategy. Ferguson felt it. Wenger felt it. Benitez felt it. Every top manager in England suddenly realized that they weren't just competing with Mourinho's tactics, they were competing with his aura. He made the Premier League shift its identity. He forced teams to adjust to Chelsea's defensive block, to Chelsea's counterattacks, to Chelsea's physicality, to Chelsea's mental warfare. In 2 seasons, Mourinho didn't just win trophies. He altered the landscape of English football. Suddenly, structure mattered more than flair. Discipline mattered more than improvisation. Systems mattered more than style. All of Europe watched and reacted. Mourinho wasn't following the direction of football, he was dragging it with him. But Mourinho's greatest weakness had always been woven into his strength. His need for complete control over players, staff, tactics, media narratives made him brilliant, but it also made him combustible. Chelsea was owned by Roman Abramovich, a billionaire accustomed to power, influence, and artistic football. Mourinho's success masked the tension brewing behind closed doors. Abramovich didn't want a defensive empire. He wanted spectacle. He wanted the flair of Barcelona. He wanted a team that justified his money through beauty. Mourinho rejected that vision entirely. The first sign of fracture came when Abramovich pushed the signing of Andriy Shevchenko. Mourinho didn't want him, not because Shevchenko lacked quality, but because he represented a shift in control. Abramovich was imposing his will on Mourinho's system. It was a quiet but lethal wound, and the dressing room felt the energy change. The club that once moved with one voice started moving with conflicting agendas. Mourinho felt betrayed, and once trust evaporated, paranoia rushed in to fill the space. He questioned loyalty. He tightened his grip. He became more confrontational with the board, more abrasive with the media, more distant from players. Chelsea kept winning, but the machine had a fracture deep in its core. And when the fracture finally split open, after Champions League failure, internal politics, and emotional fatigue, the inevitable happened. Mourinho and Chelsea parted ways. It wasn't a dramatic firing. It wasn't a public scene. It was a silent separation marked by exhaustion on both sides. Mourinho left a club he had transformed, but Chelsea was never the same. Players cried, fans protested, rivals celebrated. But everyone felt something deeper. The era had shifted. Mourinho had built an empire, but in doing so, he had also broken the idea that football could remain naive. His presence forced every club in England to evolve or disappear. And yet, Mourinho wasn't done. His exit from Chelsea wasn't the fall of a king, it was the evolution of a storm. He had conquered Portugal. He had conquered England. Now he wanted something darker, something more volatile, something that mirrored his own hunger for control and chaos. Italy, Serie A, Inter Milan, another sleeping giant with a history of implosion, a club begging for a man willing to challenge tradition, politics, and the old Italian defensive orthodoxy. Inter didn't realize it yet, but Mourinho wasn't coming for trophies. He was coming for Barcelona, for revenge, for the ghost of Guardiola, for the club that denied him, and Italy would become the stage for the most brutal, tactical war modern football had ever seen. Italy was a country built on football traditional land, where defensive mastery was treated like ancient art, where tactics were debated in cafes like politics, and where clubs carried decades of ego, scars, and identity. Serie A was a chessboard controlled by old men in suits, by unwritten rules, and by a culture that worshipped order. It was the kind of league that swallowed foreign managers whole. But when José Mourinho arrived at Inter Milan, He wasn't intimidated by the weight of history. If anything, he looked at Italy with curiosity like a scientist examining a new specimen. Inter Milan was a club with money, prestige, and ambition, but also one cursed by constant failure. They had talent but no discipline, status but no soul. And Mourinho saw an opportunity to rebuild them from the inside out. From his first minutes inside Inter's training ground, Mourinho made it clear he wasn't there to be liked. He studied players the way a detective studies suspects, cold, analytical, probing for weakness. Legends like Zanetti, Cambiaso, Materazzi, and Samuel felt the air tighten around them. Mourinho didn't try to win them over. He forced them into his orbit. His opening message was uncompromising. You are not stars, you are soldiers. This wasn't motivational rhetoric. It was a contract. Under Mourinho, talent didn't guarantee loyalty. Effort didn't guarantee affection. Only obedience and sacrifice guaranteed survival. And Inter, tired of years of underachievement, submitted to this new doctrine with startling speed. Inter soon transformed into the perfect embodiment of Mourinho's football philosophy, a ruthless, disciplined collective where every player understood his role with military clarity. Sneijder became his orchestrator. Milito became his silent executioner. Eto'o, once one of the world's deadliest forwards, humbled himself and ran along the flank like a defensive foot soldier because Mourinho told him it was necessary. The team moved with a unity that made opposition managers nervous before matches even began. Inter didn't just defend, they strangled opponents. They didn't just attack, they struck like a sniper, one shot, one kill. But Mourinho's impact in Italy wasn't limited to his football. He attacked the culture. He challenged the league's unwritten rules, mocked its politics, and exposed its hypocrisy. His press conferences became battlegrounds where he dissected journalists with a smile sharp enough to cut. He accused referees of bias, accused clubs of conspiracies, accused entire institutions of trying to undermine Inter. Italy hated him. They resented his arrogance, his provocations, his refusal to respect their tradition. But Mourinho understood hatred better than anyone. Hatred creates energy, and energy creates unity. He turned the entire league's hostility into Inter's motivation. The more they hated him, the more his players loved him. Yet beneath the surface, Mourinho was preparing for a much larger war, a war not against Italy, but against the very club that had shaped him and rejected him. Barcelona, a club that had chosen Guardiola over him. A club that now represented everything Mourinho despised. Possession, football, romantic ideals, purity, elegance, superiority. Guardiola's Barcelona was being called the greatest team ever assembled. Xavi, Iniesta, Messi, Busquets. Their football was a symphony, and Mourinho wanted to destroy the symphony, not out of jealousy, but out of obsession. He needed to prove that beauty was fragile, that possession could be suffocated, that even the gods of football could bleed. The Champions League drew the battle lines. Inter versus Barcelona in the semi-final. Mourinho versus Guardiola. Pragmatism versus purity. Darkness versus light. The first leg in Milan was a shock to the world. Barcelona arrived expecting control. They expected possession to guarantee dominance, but Mourinho's Inter suffocated them in ways they had never experienced. Every passing lane was blocked, every transition punished, every weakness exploited. Inter won 3-1, but the score didn't capture the brutality. It wasn't football. It was an ambush. Mourinho had hit Barcelona so hard that Europe felt the impact. But it was the second leg, the infamous night at the Camp Nou, where Mourinho cemented his legend. 30 minutes into the match, Thiago Motta was sent off with a red card, leaving Inter with 10 men. In the most difficult stadium on earth, against the most powerful team in the world, Inter were reduced to a defensive funeral march. Barcelona attacked relentlessly, swarming the box, suffocating Inter with wave after wave of pressure. Yet Mourinho remained on the sideline, arms folded, unmoved. He had predicted this. He had prepared for this. And Inter, down to 10 men, didn't just defend, they survived with a level of discipline and sacrifice that bordered on spiritual. Every block, every interception, every tackle felt like an act of war. Barcelona eventually scored, but too late. Inter were through. And the moment the final whistle blew, the Camp Nou erupted in fury. Objects rained down. Security tried to block Mourinho's path. Barcelona fans screamed for blood, but he walked forward anyway, straight toward the celebrating Inter fans, his fist pumping into the Catalan night like a man who had conquered the world. That walk in the rain became iconic because it was more than a celebration. It was a message to Barcelona, to Guardiola, to Europe. Your dream football can be beaten. Your beauty is not invincible. Your empire can fall. Inter went on to win the Champions League final and complete the treble, the greatest achievement in the club's history. But Mourinho didn't linger for emotional attachment. He left Inter like a fugitive fleeing the scene of a perfect crime. He knew comfort weakened him. He knew sentiment softened him. He wanted another battlefield, another empire to challenge, another rival to destroy. And at that moment, in the halls of the Santiago Bernabeu, a club consumed by politics, ego, and chaos waited for him. Real Madrid, the only environment intense enough and dangerous enough for Mourinho's next war. Real Madrid is not a football club, it is a kingdom, a political machine dressed in white, a place where pressure is permanent and failure is fatal. Managers are not hired, they are tested, judged, and discarded. The Bernabeu is a cathedral built on the ghosts of legends, and those ghosts demand perfection. Most coaches enter Madrid hoping to survive. José Mourinho entered hoping to conquer. He wasn't coming for peace or continuity. He was coming for war, and waiting for him on the other side of Spain was the enemy he had been preparing for since the day Barcelona chose Guardiola instead of him. A Barcelona side so elegant, so hypnotic, so universally adored that people called them the greatest team in football history. Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, the holy trio. Guardiola, the golden prophet of beautiful football. Their style, the purest expression of possession football ever seen. And Mourinho looked at them with something deeper than rivalry. He looked at them with purpose. His Real Madrid tenure began with a simple truth. Madrid was broken. The dressing room was fractured by ego, politics, and years of internal sabotage. Leaks were constant. Trust was fractured. Players whispered behind managers' backs. The board meddled in everything. Florentino Perez, the architect of the Galacticos era, wanted a superstar team but had no interest in patience. Real Madrid was a kingdom at war with itself. Mourinho stepped into that chaos with the confidence of a man who believed he could bend the entire institution to his will. He imposed order. He imposed fear. He created alliances and demanded loyalty. Cristiano Ronaldo embraced him instantly. Sergio Ramos resisted. Casillas opposed him. These divisions would later become fatal, but in the early years, they fueled Real Madrid's transformation into a high-speed counter-attacking juggernaut that played football with a level of athletic violence and precision Europe had never seen. But Mourinho's Madrid wasn't judged on domestic success. Everything in Spain revolved around one battle, defeating Barcelona. Guardiola's team humiliated opponents with possession. They drained life from matches by keeping the ball, passing teams into submission until they collapsed. They were loved by neutrals, adored by analysts, worshipped by fans. Yet to Mourinho, Barcelona were a myth waiting to be exposed. He believed that beauty without struggle was fragile, that possession without pain was theatrical, that Guardiola's philosophy could be broken if the right plan, the right energy, and the right level of mental warfare were applied. So Mourinho declared war publicly, aggressively, relentlessly. It began in the press conferences. Mourinho accused referees of bias. He suggested Barcelona were protected politically. He questioned UEFA, La Liga, and anyone else who supported them. Every statement was designed to destabilize Barcelona's sense of moral superiority. It was genius and madness all at once. Then came the wave of Clásicos 5 in a row, in a span so short that the rivalry turned into open hostility. These matches weren't football, they were chaos. Fights, red cards, diving, accusations, and a level of emotional violence that left Spanish football scarred. The most unforgettable moment came when Mourinho, during a sideline altercation, reached out and poked Tito Vilanova in the eye. It was shocking, disgraceful, and yet completely in character. Mourinho wasn't trying to win hearts, he was trying to destroy Barcelona's aura of purity. Despite the chaos, he began finding cracks in Barca's armor. He built a Real Madrid side capable of launching counterattacks at speeds that defied logic. Ronaldo became the sharpest weapon in world football. Di Maria became chaos incarnate. Zil became the quiet genius pulling strings behind the scenes. Khedira and Alonso became the engine. Benzema, the movement. Ramos, the warrior. Mourinho didn't build a team. He built a missile. And eventually, the missile hit its target. In the 2011-12 season, Real Madrid stormed through La Liga with historic force 121 goals, 100 points, and a title ripped away from the greatest Barcelona side ever assembled. Finally, Mourinho had done what he promised. He broke Guardiola domestically. He cracked the supposedly unbreakable system. He proved that Barcelona could be beaten by a faster, stronger, more ruthless philosophy. But the victory came at a cost. As Real Madrid rose, Mourinho's relationships inside the club dissolved. His obsession with control turned into paranoia. He distrusted players, staff members, even the club captain. The Casillas conflict became a civil war. Ramos sided with the captain. Younger players began to question him. The board grew tired of the drama. Former Real Madrid legends attacked him in the media. Mourinho fought back. Every week was another scandal, another argument, another explosion. And then came the moment that defined the beginning of his downfall. Another Champions League heartbreak. Penalties, inches. Fate turning its back on him at the worst possible time. The trophy he needed most, the one he had built Real Madrid for. The one that would make his legacy eternal slipped away year after year by the finest margins. The dressing room fractured completely. Players no longer ran through walls for him. His message grew tired. His methods stopped inspiring and started suffocating. For the first time, Mourinho couldn't control the narrative. The Bernabeu, always hungry and never forgiving, had turned against him, and in 2013, Real Madrid and Mourinho separated with a collective sigh of exhaustion. He had given them power, identity, and war, but the price had been enormous. Mourinho left a changed man. The storm that once made him invincible had begun to consume him from within. The years that followed his chaotic Chelsea return, his turbulent Manchester United era, his defiant Tottenham spell, his emotional Roma chapter proved something profound. Mourinho was brilliant, but he was also broken by the very fire that made him special. His methods still worked, but not forever. His systems still won, but often at the cost of unity. His charisma remained lethal, but it no longer seduced entire dressing rooms the way it once had. The game evolved because of him, but the evolution also slowly left him behind. And yet, his legacy is undeniable. Modern football, its structures, its tactical discipline, its psychological warfare, its data-driven planning exists because José Mourinho forced the sport to evolve. He made managers into global stars. He turned press conferences into battlegrounds. He proved that discipline could defeat beauty, that organization could conquer flair, that a team built like a fortress could humble a team built like a dream. He didn't just change football. He broke the romantic illusions surrounding it. José Mourinho's story is not one of perfection or purity. It is a story of disruption, a story of ambition carried like a weapon, a story of a man who believed he could bend the game to his will and often did. But greatness comes with a price, and Mourinho paid it with relationships, reputations, and pieces of himself he will never get back. Still, long after he leaves the touchline, football will continue to feel his fingerprints on every tactic, every rivalry, every structure, every team that values discipline over chaos. Because José Mourinho didn't just become the special one, he became the architect of a new football era, a storm that reshaped everything in its path. A reminder that the people who break the world are often the same people who change it forever.